Welcome back. In this video, we'll be bringing our solar skylines to life using interactivity, animation, and sound. And this will be done through Adobe Aero's Behavior Builder. The Behavior Builder is located at the bottom left of the workspace as a stick figure icon, and is essentially an environment that allows us to add behaviors to various objects within our scene. Behaviors are made up of two main components. The first is the trigger, and the second is the action. Triggers are used to activate the actions in our scene. So in this example, I've got this character here selected. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to trigger. I'm going to select the tap trigger. Now this means that this subject matter is our interactive button. So when I've tapped on this character, it will activate an action. Right now we have no action assigned, but if I come down here to the bottom left, right underneath the trigger, I can select action, play animation. I'm going to come here to the right side. Notice that play animation action has its own properties right here. The subject matter is the character 2. The animation is character 2. We're going to select the wave clip. So what's going to happen is when I tap on this character, it's going to do a wave animation. You'll also notice as I scroll down, there are more properties that you can adjust. You can adjust its clip length, its speed, its play count. You can also make this play for infinity if you want. So you can play with all these settings to get the right fitting for you. So once I'm happy with these settings, I'm going to go up here to the top left of the workspace and click preview. Now, when I tap on the character, he instantly starts waving. On the topic of the animation action, there are only a certain number of objects that have pre-made animations. These are the engines, the two characters with a number of different animation states built within them, the wind turbine, the solar sunflower, and the airboat. A great thing about the Behavior Builder is that you can add levels of detail and complexity to your behaviors. For example, you can create behaviors that trigger off actions that play sequentially from one action to another. This means that once this character wave animation has been finished, it then plays off the next animation, which is character talking. We can also stack actions together so that they play at exactly the same time. For example, I can get the character to aim directly at the camera whilst it's waving, and also get it to play some audio. The warning icons show that I need to input some properties. So we're going to look at aim first. When using the aim action, it's important to note that the subject will always face its target via its z-axis, which is the blue arrow indicated here. We want to select the aim target. So for this example, we want to select the camera. But you'll also notice that you can use just about any object in the scene as the aim target. So you can essentially get this character to look at almost anything in the scene. For this example, we'll use the camera. So the camera has been selected. We can also test it by clicking this play button. You'll notice that when it aims directly at the camera and it loses its footing on the platform. To fix this, we want to select the option billboard only. So we're going to select that. And that means it rotates only on its y-axis. So let's give that a test. So you'll notice that it rotates towards the camera, but only stays fixed on its y-axis. All the other properties seem to be fine here. So let's go to our play audio option. You'll notice again the warning icon is still there because we haven't provided input into its properties. So the subject matter is character 2, and this is where the audio will come from. Audio in Adobe Aero is spatial, so that when you move around the scene, the audio changes in volume based on how close you are to the subject matter. Let's select the audio clip that we want to use for this character. In this example, we'll use character 01 greeting. Let's give that a test.
Oh!
That's a bit silly. So spatial audio works like this. If I zoom out and press play, you'll notice it sounds it's far away. If I get closer, the audio gets louder. So this is really great at adding immersion to your scene. So when you walk around your environment, the audio changes in volume. Spatial audio really creates a level of depth and atmosphere in your environment. You can also switch from spatial audio to ambient sound by selecting this option here. When this is turned on, the volume of the sound remains consistent and stays the same regardless of where you are in the environment. This is generally best for music when you just want it to play in the background. I'll turn this off as we do want spatial audio for this particular sound. We can also adjust the volume, so from 100% to 0. For this example, we might just set this down to about 60%. We can also adjust the play count, but for this example, we'll set it to just 1. And you can also get the audio to play for infinity, but I'm not sure we want this for this example. So let's come over here and confirm our behavior sequence. So once the character has been tapped with the tap trigger, it will play the wave animation, the aim action, and the play audio action all at once in this one stack. And then it will move on to the next action and play character talking. So let's give that a go by coming here to preview at the top left and hitting that. So when I tap, it aims at the camera, waves, and plays a sound. If I come over here, I can do this again. Brilliant. That's exactly what we wanted. In addition to this behavior sequence that we've just created, we can also add additional triggers to a single object. We can use the start trigger. So what the start trigger does is it activates as soon as the scene has been loaded. Rather than just having a character stand static and lifeless, we can actually add an idle animation to this character. So I'll select action, play animation. I'm going to select the character idle clip, and I'm going to scroll down and go to infinite. So that will play forever. What this will do is that if the character hasn't been tapped on, it will simply just play its idle animation. When it's been tapped, it will play this sequence up here, and then it will revert straight back to its idle animation. Let's give that a test. So right now, we haven't selected the character, we haven't tapped on it or anything, but it's just playing its idle animation. And this is much more interesting than just having an object static and lifeless. And when I tap, it will play its wave animation, its talk animation, and reverts back to its idle animation. Using what we've learnt so far, I'm going to start adding some actions and animations to our platforms to bring them to life. First of all, I'm going to select the platform I want to edit. I'm going to select the engines and start adding some actions and animations to them. So I'm going to select the trigger, start, action, play animation, and we're going to select engine.play as the clip. And I'm going to apply this to all the engines that are on this platform. I'm also going to set this to infinite, so it plays forever. Once I've got all the animations playing on the engines, you'll get something like this, but you'll notice it still kind of looks a bit static. It's not really looking like it's floating in the air, so let's add a bit more movement to it. Let's select the group this time, and we'll select trigger, start, as we wanted to start at the very beginning, select action, and now we're going to select bounce. Now what this will do is it will make the object bounce between one point and another. So right now you will have it bounce between its current position and it will rise 10 centimeters up above, as shown here in the offset section. So you'll notice in the y-axis it rises to about 10 centimeters. Now this is fine, but we want to control the movement a bit. Right now it still feels a bit rigid. We want to change this by changing the easing option. So right now it's set to linear, which makes it a bit rigid. We want to set this to ease in and out, so if the movement's a bit smoother. You can also play with any of these other settings as well, but ease in and out allows us to create a smooth movement between the 2 points. You'll notice that's probably too fast, so we can actually change the duration as well. So as it goes up and down by 10 centimeters, we can also change its duration here. So we might change that to about 5 seconds. So it should take about 5 seconds to complete one full bounce. We want to scroll down here and we want to set this to infinite as well so that it floats forever. Now when we go to preview, let's try this out. So this feels much better and more believable. You've got the engines activated and it's also floating on the spot. We can add a bit more complexity to its movement by adding more actions. So let's try using the rotate action. We're going to come down and select roll, change that to 2, so it'll roll on its z-axis by about 2 degrees. We want that to play about twice, and we're going to select back and forth, make that infinite, and you'll notice it rocks side to side. So on top of that bounce action, it also rotates slightly too. See, the more layers of movement we have, the more believable the scene becomes. We can also top that off with a bit of spatial audio. So let's look at the play audio action. We are going to select, let's say, the engines audio clip. Let's test that. That's how it should sound. We are going to maybe put that down to about 50%. And for the play count, we'll make that infinite. And let's test that. So we've got movement and sound, and when we go back and forth, the sound disappears, it gets more subtle. As we get closer, it gets even louder. So when we're exploring this in AR, you'll be able to notice that level of atmosphere and depth with that audio playing. Another cool action that we can explore is the orbit action, which allows us to get objects to orbit around particular target objects, like so. This one is a bit intermediate, but I can show you the steps on how to set this up. Using a set of actions, including the orbit action, we're going to get this to orbit around this group here. This group will be our target. This target object's pivot point will be the center of rotation. So let's get this set up. Let's select the airboat here. Then we're going to select trigger, start. The action we're going to select is orbit. Now you'll notice that the subject here is the airboat. That's what we want. The center point that we want the object to rotate around or orbit around is this group here, which is called group large platform. So we want to select that. I'll go back into orbit. The center should be group large platform. So let's just look for it in a list, group large platform. Let's just test that out. And that's orbits around this group like so. But this looks kind of weird and we don't really want this. So let's tweak a few of the settings. We want to make this last a bit longer. So let's maybe set it to about 15 seconds. We don't necessarily want a smooth orbit. So you notice it sort of slowly accelerates. And when it comes around like so, it will slowly decelerate. We want a consistent speed. So we're going to change the easing to linear. So that means there's no acceleration, no deceleration. It's just one linear speed throughout its orbit. And that's exactly what we want. The direction is fine. We'll keep that clockwise. You can also go counterclockwise, but we'll just leave it clockwise for now. And we want to set this to infinite so it plays forever. So now we have the orbit set up. You'll notice it's great. It's orbiting around the target object. However, its rotation isn't changing. It's kind of just fixed at a particular angle, and we need to fix this. So we are going to add another action. We are going to add the rotate action. We are going to scroll up, check its properties. We want this to rotate while it's orbiting. So we're kind of playing with layers of animation here. So we want to rotate it on its y-axis. I'm going to rotate this 360 degrees, and let's give that a go. That's too fast, and it's rotating the wrong way. So we're going to add a negative value to this so that it spins in the other direction. Now we are going to play with these settings. We're going to do an adjustment to easing. We're going to set this to linear so that it's consistent with the orbit action. And we're going to set this to the same duration as the orbit action. So if we go back to orbit, you'll notice that an entire orbit, one whole cycle takes about 15 seconds. We want to match that with rotation, and we want to set that to 15. So this will rotate at the same rate as the orbit. And then we want to make that infinite. So let's test these two actions together in the preview tab. So you notice it's orbiting quite well. It's also rotating at the same rate too. So it creates that idea that it's rotating on a nice angle, but there's still a few things missing. It's missing animation, it's missing audio, and it's also missing, a bit more dynamic animation to make it look like it's floating in the air. So let's fix that. Let's first give it its own animation. So this object has its own pre-made animation that I've created. We're going to select the play animation action. We are going to ensure that the correct subject is selected. So that is the airboat. And then we are going to select the clip play. So when we test that, you'll notice all the engine parts are moving together. So this is a predefined animation I've made for this, and this is one of the clips that plays. So it plays on loop like so. We're going to make sure that that is set to infinite, so that plays forever. The last two things we'll give it are similar to what we did to the previous platforms that we worked on. So let's add some bounce. Then we'll add some audio. So now we have all these actions layered together. We've got orbit, rotate, play animation, bounce, and play audio. So let's give that a test. That's great. Fantastic. You can even hear that sound fade in and out as it gets closer to the camera, which is exactly what we want. And I think that's pretty believable. It is missing a pilot, but of course, yeah, you can throw a character inside there too to make it even more believable. So one last thing I wanted to show you for some of those who are a bit more fancy pants and intermediate is using something called the proximity trigger. Proximity triggers are activated based on the distance between the viewer and the subject object. So say for example, if I get super close to this object, or if I get within the vicinity of this object, say 30 to 40 centimeters, I can then tell the trigger to activate at a certain distance. I can change this trigger from the start action, and we can change that to proximity enter. So when I get to a certain range, it should trigger the action that are designated to this trigger. So the subject I'm going to select is group small platform. So we're just going to find that in the list like so. So this is the subject that we want to get close to. We want to specify a distance for the action to be activated. So we want to say, maybe let's say 40 centimeters. So if we get to 40 centimeters within range of 40 centimeters of this object, that's when it'll start activating. I'm just going to change that to 40, like so. We want to prevent this from, well, actually this is up to you, but I would make sure that this never activates, because then it'll keep repeating itself. So I set that to never. And what we're going to get this trigger to do is essentially get it to lift up into the sky from the ground. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to create a new action, which is move. You'll notice our platform is currently in the air, but we actually wanted to start off on the ground. So I'm going to make it align to the floor. I can actually come here to the actions toolbar over here on the right, and I can select align selection, which will snap that directly to the floor. So we're going to select that. That's now on the floor. Now, we now have the move action selected here. We are wanting to get this platform to float into the air. So on the Y offset, the reason why I have Y offset is because we want it to fly up on its Y axis. We are going to increase that to maybe about, let's say 45 centimeters. So it will rise up to about 45 centimeters, or even more actually. Let's increase that by about 50 centimeters. Great. It is a bit fast, so we might reduce that to about, we might increase its duration to about 5 seconds. So it should rise up slowly. So that adds a bit more weight if we make it rise up a bit more slowly. We then want to swap these stacks around so that this group here comes after this action here. So what I can do is I can actually swap these around. I can drag these around to change the order of sequences. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it across until I see this little line appear, and we're going to swap these around. So what will happen is, once we reach a certain range to this platform, it will then trigger this action, which will make it float into the air, and then it will commence with its standard floating, bouncing, and audio. Or actually, we want to drag this. We want to make the audio start at the very beginning. So we are going to select this, and we're going to drag it right underneath move, like so. So let's give that a test. So as I get closer to this platform, it then activates and rises into the air. And then recommences its typical floating animation that we programmed earlier. And that's a wrap on using the behavior builder. In the next video of this series, we'll look into previewing this entire Solar Skylines experience in augmented reality using your mobile phone or tablet. We'll also then look into publishing your AR experiences so that others can explore it via QR codes or by exporting them as a .real file.